This video comes courtesy of our Patreon raffle winner for July, Nathan Spradlin. And if you too would like your idea for a Media Mementos video to come to life, stay tuned to the end of this video and I'll tell you how. One of the most popular series I have here on Media Mementos is Versus the Network, where, for the most part, innocent shows have to do battle against a greedy, evil, or incompetent network, and then tragedy ensues. On Versus the Network, we've covered a wide array of situations. There's been the network being grossly incompetent, like with Dilbert, the network specifically targeting one show to make everybody miserable on the Weird Al show, or hey, sometimes even the network being the one in the right with My Name is Earl. But not once have we covered a show like the George Carlin show.
Has there been a plane crash or something? Is that why everybody's looking at me?
This time, it wasn't the network's fault that this show met an untimely end. It was all because of the show itself, specifically the man behind it. And no, it's not George Carlin. What happened to this show and what caused it to fight against itself? Well, let me tell you the crazy story of the George Carlin show versus itself. Before we figure out what happened to the show itself, let's take a little bit of time to go over the history of the George Carlin show. Contrary to the name, it was not created by George Carlin. It was created by former Simpsons producer Sam Simon. Simon was looking to do an edgier, less friendly version of Cheers, and he had one man in mind to help make this whole thing come together, George Carlin, but that wasn't an easy feat to accomplish. Up until this point, Carlin was not exactly eager to have his own show. Whereas Jerry Seinfeld and Roseanne Barr took their sitcom offers in stride and ended up creating cultural phenomenons, Carlin saw things another way entirely. Oh sure, he'd been on TV plenty of times, but when it came to having a sitcom being run by a bunch of people with college degrees and thumbs up their butts, Carlin wasn't really all that interested in pursuing that path. But then Sam Simon had a meeting with him, and as they say, the rest was history. Okay, not exactly history, because unfortunately, what was discussed during this meeting between George Carlin and Sam Simon was lost to time. But after reading some of the accounts that Carlin has provided, it's safe to say that Simon said that he would have a show that was made to Carlin's liking. This, combined with the fact that Simon helped produce one of the greatest comedy shows of all time, probably helped tip Carlin towards saying yes. Shortly after this meeting, the two pitched the show to Fox, it was greenlit, and then the show immediately began production. Contrary to the name of the show, The George Carlin Show, Carlin, who would obviously be starring, wouldn't play a character named George Carlin. Instead, he would be playing George O'Grady, who would be, for all intents and purposes, George Carlin if he was a taxi driver. He's still got the same temper, foul mouth, snarky edge. It's just George Carlin, but who cares?
It's foreplay.
And then once they started shooting episode 1, things went downhill very quickly. Now, quick disclaimer, most of the information I'm relaying here comes from Carlin himself, so there might be some inherent bias going on, but given a quote that we're going to be reading towards the end of this video, I'd wager a guess that about 90 to 95% of this is actually correct. So while on paper it sounds like a great idea to work with one of the 3 guys who helped make The Simpsons, in practice, if that person just so happens to be Sam Simon, you're going to have a bad time. Sam Simon is notoriously difficult to work with. He's very similar to another person we've covered here on Media Mementos, Michael Richards.
I just don't want the door to close on my line.
Much like Richards, Simon himself would be very grumpy on set, very rigid, and would want things done a certain way. And if you don't get things right quickly, you're in big trouble. Carlin hated this. Of course, Carlin himself was treated well. He was the star, and his name was in the title. If he walked, there would be no show whatsoever. So apparently Sam Simon treated him with a lot of respect. But when it came to everybody else on set, they weren't given the same courtesy. Even though Carlin hated what was going on, there was nothing he could do. Again, it's misleading because his name is in the title, but just like how he didn't create the show, Carlin also had little to no control. First off, he only wrote a couple of episodes and nothing else. 2, Simon got to direct some episodes, 6 to be specific, and Carlin did not. And 3, when it came to the writing process, Carlin found that his worst fears came to life. All these degree-carrying writers who felt that they were smarter than everybody, and probably were, and business executives and network people, they all looked down at Carlin because he wasn't on the inside. And as a result of Simon treating everybody terribly, and Carlin not having any control, he had a miserable time. And I know it's because of the situation he was in, not because of Carlin himself. Let's take a look at 2 other comedians that I mentioned earlier who also got their own shows, Roseanne Barr and Jerry Seinfeld. Jerry, well, he was the frontman through and through. In fact, the only reason that Seinfeld ended was because he didn't want to do it anymore and wanted to end the show on his own terms. So he was never really going to run into anything like this. However, someone who did run into something like this was Roseanne Barr. She ended up firing her entire writing staff after season 1 in order to gain some more control. But again, she had the power to do this. She wasn't just the star or the front woman in this case. She was one of the people running the project.
Who are you? You look familiar.
I'm one of the writers.
Carlin being added to the George Carlin show feels a lot like what happened with the Baby Blues show that was aired on the WB. The network was only interested in having the name and nothing else. But that was a comic strip. This is a real person with a lot of accomplishments and is known as one of the greatest comedians of all time. Though with that being said, I'm sure Carlin's natural personality didn't really help matters. He's known to be kind of grumpy, albeit lovably grumpy, and a fair bit combative. We don't know just how much he put up a fight at first, but we do know that by the time the show got renewed, all the fire in him had gone out. He, along with the rest of the crew, minus Sam Simon, were praying that the show wouldn't be renewed for a second season, but, much to their horror, it was. And they all had good reason for not thinking that the show would continue either. The George Carlin show didn't bomb, per se, but it also wasn't the smash hit that Fox wanted. So given that it was in this ratings purgatory of sorts, it could have gone either way. But the weird part about Fox renewing the George Carlin show is, much like the cast and crew, Fox didn't really care all that much about it. As Carlin would say in his autobiography, Fox was never all that invested in the program, but it got worse over time with less commercials being aired, less money being put into it, and overall, the network just not caring. The George Carlin show was an afterthought, so why bother picking it back up? My personal theory is that they believed that the show needed one more season to get back up and running. Not every show can be great right out of the gate, right? But of course, Fox decided to give them one more shot, and season 2 began production, and Carlin was done. He did what he was told, he went along with the script, but as far as he was concerned, he had one foot out the door. He was begging for the show to be canceled, and one day, he got his wish.
When they called me from Fox in my trailer and told me it had been canceled, I said, thank you. Thank you for not waiting for the season to end.
In later years, Carlin's view on the show would lighten up a little bit, but not really all the way. For example, there's this quote, "I had a great time. I never laughed so much, so often, so hard as I did with cast members Alex Rocco, Chris Rich, Tony Stark, not that Tony Stark. There was a very strange, very good sense of humor on that stage. The biggest problem, though, was that Sam Simon is a horrible person to be around. There's a producer-writer in-group culture in television that isn't friendly to outsiders, especially a star who, though he's supposed to be the raison d'etre of the project, comes from another area of show business. They keep you at arm's length, keep you in the dark about certain areas. It made no difference that Jerry and I were executive producers. Sam was the showrunner, the most important person in getting the show on. This Jerry in question, by the way, is Jerry Hamza, and I haven't mentioned him in the story because he doesn't really factor into the crazy behind-the-scenes stories, so sorry, Jerry. Nothing personal. I was incredibly happy when the show was canceled. I was frustrated that it had taken me away from my true work.
Yeah. Okay. It's been a little while.
So, yeah, that's Carlin's take on it. But what about Sam Simons? Well, he was in for a rude awakening because, for some reason, he believed that Carlin had a great time through and through. But then when Simon was getting made fun of in interviews and on Carlin's own website, he said that next time he went into the business, he'd need to check the mental health of his comedy partner. Simon finally saw the light, and he was none too happy either. But to his credit, he owned up to what he did. According to him, after he left The Simpsons, he just turned into this brutal monster. He goes crazy, and then after the experience is over, he feels bad and hates himself. And I'm glad he was able to realize that before he passed on, but he still left a lot of people with very negative memories, Carlin included. So if you've ever wondered, how could a show possibly destroy itself without actually intending to do so, this hopefully answers your question. The negative experience on set weighed everybody down, they lost their energy, and then, eventually, it was finally put out of its misery.
Hey, I got your conscience right here, Cronkite.
Are there more shows that have had experiences like these? Oh, I'm sure. And do I want to cover them someday on Media Mementos? Probably. I'm open to it. But let's just finish the video we've already got first, okay? That was the story of George Carlin versus itself. A show that probably wasn't going to be the next Seinfeld or anything, but it probably could have been around for a couple of years had the man in charge not gotten so much power and then proceeded to abuse it. And now, before we get to our Patreon stuff, as well as the usual outro, we have another fan art shoutout. This time, it goes to Sean S., who made this beauty right here. I love the cartoonish, over-the-top design here, and the eyes and that little bob pin there, with his little overexcited expression. I love it. What do you think Sean S.'s interpretation of Trevor's watching here? If you're asking me, I'd say it's the comments on the Drawn Together Season 3 video that say, "You have no idea what you're talking about!" I mean, if the creators said it too. But I've said that enough already. Anyways, thank you so much, Sean S. I always love getting this fan art stuff, especially when the artist really captures the avatar and their own unique style. And yours is very appealing to look at, so yeah, thank you very, very much. Well, folks, thanks for watching the video. What'd you guys think? Have you ever seen this show before? If so, what did you think of it? And what are some other shows you've heard about that Sam Simon caused a lot of problems on? Comment below and let me know, because I'm always excited to hear what you guys have to say. And now it's time to thank our wonderful Patreon people, starting with our Masters of Fate. Chan 11, Drew the Stew, Kev Messick, Manny Paredes, MD the Dude, Quiet Chap, Ryan Williams, Timey, and Woody Woo. And now our executive producers, Aaron Vasquez, Albert Robinson, Blackjack, HR Huffman, Indiscreet One, Ravioli Supremo, Unkale, and who else but Zane. If you too would like your name read at the end of every Media Mementos video, then why not consider donating to the Patreon? There's a fancy little link in the description below for you to check out. And if you want to get more involved in the Media Mementos fan community, down there we've also got a link to the Media Mementos Discord server. Why not pop in and say hello? Alright folks, thanks for watching the video, and I'll see you guys next time.
It was a show about nothing. I mean, most TV is about nothing. At least this show is honest about it, you know? And now there's going to be some show which pretends to be about something, but it'll be really about nothing, and what are we going to do?